Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. President Trump ran for office promising to restore the country's borders. He won on that. It happened within recent memory. Most of us remember it. And new polls show why it happened. It turns out that Americans of all backgrounds and all ethnicities are deeply skeptical of immigration. They want it reduced. Republicans can win elections by listening to them, but they're not. Congressional Republicans are tonight on the brink of giving amnesty to a huge number of illegal aliens just in time for the fall election. Some of these Republicans are plotting with Democrats to give amnesty to every illegal who originally entered this country as a minor. Potentially, that is millions and millions of people. In return for that, voters would get nothing. No border wall, no reduction in overall immigration rates, no defunding of sanctuary cities, no abolition of chain migration, which is indefensible. Wages will stay low because it turns out supply and demand is real. If you have an overabundance of something, including labor, its value falls. Politically, more states will go the way of California. So what exactly is the point of this? Republican Congressman Steve King of Iowa joins us to explain. Congressman, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, Tucker.
I understand that a small number of affluent Republican donors are pushing very hard for this, and at least one has promised to withhold future donations if he doesn't get what he wants. But aside from that, what is the upside to this plan?
Well, I don't see a lot of upside. And I don't see it because in every single plan or plans, and there are essentially 4 bills, maybe 5 of them out there now in this Queen of the Hill approach that's there, there's a significant aspect of amnesty in every one of them. And I believe every one of them is even greater than the amnesty that Barack Obama unconstitutionally provided with DACA. That's the downside. The upside is that there is enforcement. The Goodlatte bill is the best of the 4. It still has 2 components of amnesty, not 1. But it does get us border security. And we're looking to get funding. They are, by the way, I'm not supporting this bill. They are looking to get $25 billion for a wall. But my argument is you start this path now and you give amnesty to 2 or 3 million or more. Who's going to be the next most sympathetic group of illegal aliens in America that will be deified again and traded for another measure of security? At some point, everybody in America that's here illegally gets amnesty. And what's the border security for in the first place? We need to be willing to send people back or they'll keep coming. That's just a simple equation of history and humanity.
Well, you would think that the Congress of the United States would put the interests of American citizens first, and those, of course, are border security. And then once we've done that, we can talk about the interests of foreign citizens living within our borders. But that's not the priority of Paul Ryan, obviously. Why?
Well, I think he believes in this, and well before he became the Speaker of the House, he and I had a good number of debates on immigration, and he long argued that our birth rate is down in America. We need to bring people in to fill the gap that's created because the birth rate is down, never mind addressing getting the birth rate back up again, and that anytime we bring in immigrants of any kind, they improve our GDP. And I would argue, yes, if any one individual, no matter how much a ward of a state they become, if they actually earned $1, they contributed to the GDP, or if they consume money, they contributed to the GDP. But it doesn't hold up. We need to increase the per capita GDP of our people. We need to restore their respect for the rule of law. And for me, the center of this has always been restore the respect for the rule of law.
Yes, and I wish the leadership of your party agreed with that. They clearly don't. Congressman, thank you for your voice in this. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tucker.
The federal government has new figures on the number of illegal immigrants who are behind bars in this country. We've long guessed at that number. We can't really know it, but we're getting closer. Ronald Vitello is acting Deputy Commissioner of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and he joins us tonight. Deputy Commissioner, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So what do we now know about the number of foreign citizens here illegally behind bars in the United States?
Well, it's a big number. The Department of Justice and the Secretary of Homeland Security published this report based on an initiative out of the White House, an executive order that talked about immigration enforcement improvements. So this renewed focus on border security and immigration enforcement gets us to documents like this one that fully informs the justice system and the number of people that are incarcerated. And I believe the number is like 93% of those that are in custody that are from another country are also in the country illegally. So it underscores the need for border security technology, infrastructure, more agents, what we're trying to action plan for the president to bring operational control to the border. So this is an example of why that's important, because we wouldn't have a problem as big as the one that's being delivered in this report.
Well, exactly. And it also suggests that people who come here illegally are much more likely to commit other crimes than immigrants who come legally, and I guess that makes sense. Tell us about the volume of fentanyl coming over our borders right now.
So it's a big problem. Don't have the numbers in front of me, but like last year, we saw over 110% increase versus the previous year. Those numbers continue to go up. I was in the JFK mail facility with our Customs and Border Protection officers a couple of weeks ago. They have to screen 800,000 packages that are coming into the mail facility. That's just U.S. mail. That doesn't account for the things that we get off of these express consignment like UPS, FedEx, DHL. So there's lots of volume of illicit commerce coming into the United States, but that requires us to screen that stuff and try to keep fentanyl away from the streets of the U.S.
Killing tens of thousands of Americans, you'd think there'd be a bigger outcry. Thank you. Thank you for those numbers and for all that you do. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, recently you've seen an obsession in the press with the notion that it is particularly evil, utterly immoral, to separate illegal immigrant parents from their children. Here's part of the outcry.
Taking children from their parents, from their families, from their mothers must stop, and it is not negotiable.
Invest in children where we don't tear them from the loving arms of their mothers and their fathers.
The fact that those families are being separated at the border, the fact that children are being torn out of the arms of their mothers is on Donald Trump's head and nobody else.
There are a lot of sad stories out there, for sure. But let's put this in perspective. Parents are separated from their children every day in this country. American citizens separated from their children. That happens when they're arrested, whether it's for theft or drug dealing or tax evasion or whatever, and nobody cares. But once again, to the left, illegal immigrants are special, and they have more rights than you do. David Bernstein is the founder of Run for America, and he joins us now. David, look, I think it's, as the father of many children, I think it's crushing when parents are separated from their kids. But I wonder why this is only suddenly news. How many, just for example, children right now, American children, are living without a parent who is behind bars in this country? Do you have any idea?
Well, look, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but we know that it's actually quite sizable, and they're there for all sorts of crimes.
2.4 million.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So the majority of American prisoners have American children from whom they're separated.
Yep.
And that's a sad thing. I haven't heard anybody on the left mention that because they're not illegal aliens.
Well,
and I just wonder why the focus on the pathos of these stories while the suffering of American citizens of the exact same kind is being completely ignored by you and your fellow liberals. Why?
Well, first of all, I'm not ignoring it. I'm here talking about it with you, and I think it is unfortunate because research shows us that parents who are and parents and children, when they're separated, incurs tremendous trauma on children, right? And we have a system in this country to deal with that. I think the reality is for the people who are being separated at the border, a lot of these people are already coming from very traumatic situations, so it makes it a little bit different. But I agree, Tucker, that there should be a broader outcry about all the ways.
So you think most American prison inmates grew up in Greenwich and went to Choate? No. Actually, they grew up in poverty and in circumstances that rival those in Tegucigalpa. So let's be real here. If we really cared about American citizens as much as you care about illegal aliens,
we absolutely should have a better system for how we deal with this.
I don't think we even have a system.
We don't. You're right. We have the foster care system in this country. If you really want to talk about the crisis for
I'm
families
very aware of it.
And children in this country, the foster care system in this country is riddled with corruption, is crying out for reform. It's one of the many things that we could actually do. We could actually come together on a bipartisan basis, but people are too interested in stoking fear around immigration and issues like this, like you on this show,
really? Because
to actually
I guess I see
we could actually do together.
I see it a little differently because here I am reminding you that the crime that you're so upset about is taking place and hurting Americans, but you don't care. So, for example,
I am upset about
you had 60,000 Americans die last year of drug ODs. If you saw
that is
the
a
same proportion
devastating
of the
fact, Tucker.
But we don't care about fentanyl coming over the border. What if the same proportion of illegal aliens were dying? What if illegal aliens were dying of fentanyl, not just dealing it, which they are? If they were dying of it, do you think that we would sit back and say, we can't do anything about it, it's a demand problem? I don't think we would, actually.
No, absolutely not. And the reality is, Tucker, that I am you. There are Democrats out there who are responding to what they see, and they don't like the fact that children are separated from their parents. I do not think it is a good thing in this country any day when a child and a parent are separated, no matter what country they come from, no matter how they got here. That shouldn't happen, okay? And we should try and do our best to have a system that doesn't allow that to happen. And whether it's because they're illegal immigrants, whether it's because they're accused of shoplifting, whether it's because they're accused of tax evasion. I think the effort by you and others on the right to try and gin up this energy is exactly the kind of force that makes this such a divisive issue, Tucker. And the reality is that the immigration...
Right. That's hilarious, actually.
Why
because
is it hilarious?
What I'm interested... No, because...
I don't find anything about this
principle at stake here. No, it's hilarious because you and Elizabeth Warren jumping up and down. He's got blood on his hands. It's on his head. This happens every day, and you guys don't care because it's happening to Americans.
I care.
Well, let's talk solutions.
I'm here to tell you. I've been telling you this whole segment that I care.
I haven't. Yeah, I don't think you've actually been raising much of a hue and cry about this. When tax evaders go to jail and leave their small kids at home, it's like, that's fine. That's the price you pay when you commit a crime. So what is the answer? That if you have a small child at home and you commit a crime, we don't incarcerate you? I mean, is there a simple solution that I'm missing because I'm ginning up fear or evil? I mean, what is the solution exactly?
There's absolutely not a simple solution, Tucker, to this problem.
Then why are you pretending there is? Why are you pretending there is? You and Elizabeth Warren.
Excuse me.
Like
I never said there's a simple solution to this problem because this is certainly not a cut and dry problem. What we could do in this country, is have a different system for how we look at criminal justice, for instance. And the president, who's been eager to pardon people who Kim Kardashian puts in front of him, could look at some of the nonviolent drug offenders who are in jail, who should have their sentences reformed.
But let me just ask you really quickly, a sincere question actually. If someone has a small child at home, should we punish him differently for a crime?
Maybe we should. Maybe we should look at that differently. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying yes.
I don't know the answer, but I mean,
I don't know the answer
that's
either.
the fruitful conversation.
But this would be a good conversation to have because it needs to apply to everybody we have in this country.
Good, and not just to foreign citizens, but our own citizens.
Absolutely
David, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tucker.
Good to see you. Even some Republicans are telling you that the FBI did nothing wrong by spying on the Trump campaign. Indeed, there was no spying, they say. Why the effort to lie in the most obvious possible way? We're going to get to the bottom of this story next. By pretending that it wasn't somehow. Here was Congressman Eric Swalwell on this program just last night. Tell me why spying on the Trump campaign was not spying. Just speak slowly so I can understand.
It was not spying what they were doing.
So what was it?
They were conducting a criminal investigation.
But it's not just Democrats who are lying about this. Obedient servants of the national security state from both parties are participating in this cover-up. The media, mindless and lemming-like as always, is of course dutifully backing them up. Here's a brief selection.
I am even more convinced that the FBI did exactly what my fellow citizens would want them to do when they got the information they got, and that it has nothing to do with Donald Trump.
There's no evidence that there was a spy put into the Trump campaign.
All the other people who've seen the intelligence in your own party are saying there's just no there there. I'm wondering what it will take for you, Congressman Zeldin, to say he's full of it.
So let's try this again. In the service of clear language, Richard Painter is a professor at the University of Minnesota. He worked as an ethics lawyer in the Bush administration. He's now seeking the Democratic nomination for Senate in the state of Minnesota. Richard Painter joins us tonight. Richard, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.
So we know that an FBI and CIA informant on the government payroll, making quite a bit of money from the government, made contact with at least 3 members of the Trump campaign during the campaign, gathered information from them surreptitiously and passed it back to the Obama administration. Now, you can argue that was justified, and I'm open-minded, but that's spying. Tell me why it's not spying.
The Speaker of the House of Representatives has already talked about this, Paul Ryan, Representative Gowdy, Richard Burr over in the United States Senate Intelligence Committee And there is a
Why is that
consensus
not
among
spying?
Republicans and Democrats because they have seen the relevant information, including a lot of them have seen the classified information, which I have not seen, and neither has Fox News seen the classified information. And I don't know if this is the news channel or the fiction channel, but we need to focus on the facts here.
Okay,
and the people who've seen the facts,
down,
including the Republican leaders.
Wait, hold on. Slow down. If you would, please stop with the invective and explain to me, again slowly, why, given the fact set that I just presented to you, and I think we can agree that that's true, that that's not spying.
No, I don't think we can.
Under what circumstances would that not be spying?
Well, the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives has looked at the facts, and Richard Burr over in the Senate and the Intelligence Committee has looked at the facts, including the classified information, which I have not seen. And Fox
So
News
what do you
has not
think?
seen.
Hold on. Okay, you've already said that. You've already said that. Hold on. I understand you're repeating yourself, and you've just confirmed that whatever Republican leaders say you believe. So it's a little odd you're running as a Democrat in another conversation. But suggest to me what they might know. Hold on. Suggest to me what they might know. Just speculate, if you would. Just go crazy as a former law professor. What they might have seen that would lead them to believe the facts that I just laid out, that are not contested, do not amount to spying. Not whether justified or not, but why is that not spying?
Any Republican who saw a shred of evidence that the Obama administration was spying on the Trump campaign would clearly have said it was spying, and yet the Speaker of the United States House of
That's really your explanation, that some politician says it's not spying, therefore it's I'm asking you, hold on, I'm asking you as an office, someone running for office, use your brain. Tell me why, given what I just said, I'm going to ask you for the third time, it's really simple. I'm not asking whether it was justified or not, it may have been. But why is that not spying? Secretly gathering information on somebody and passing it back to your handlers in the administration is spying, but you won't concede it is because Trey Gowdy says it's not, but you're a Democrat? I'm totally confused by this conversation.
It doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican. The FBI
then why do you keep citing Republicans?
A job to do. It has nothing to do with it. The FBI has a job to do. If the Russians are trying to destabilize our country, as they have tried to destabilize Western democracies for 100 years, our FBI has an obligation to find out who is interfacing with the Russians and to get the FISA warrants from a judge and make sure and follow those people. We are not going to allow the Russians to engage in this kind of activity in the United States.
I get it. Was there a FISA warrant in this specific case? Because the first contact between the FBI and CIA informant and a member of the Trump campaign took place in July of 2016. That was 3 weeks before the counterintelligence investigation started. So are you saying, do you have information that there was a FISA warrant for that?
No, I'm not saying that. There is no evidence that the FBI acted inappropriately. The members of the United States Senate and House who have looked at the classified information, which I have not seen and you have not seen, have concluded that the FBI acted appropriately. Well, you can continue to make up stories about Spygate. There's a way to deflect from the Mueller investigation.
Slow down, and stop with the insults. I'm not making up stories. I'm stating known facts, which you are not contradicting. Nobody is contradicting. We know this to be true, unless we're wrong, in which case tell me how I'm wrong, but you haven't. And I'm asking you, given that that happened, why are we sure that that was justified? If it took place before the counterintelligence investigation opened. You suggested there was a FISA warrant that made that legal. Do you have knowledge of that, or are you just making that up?
No. I am saying that members of the House and Senate who have looked at the classified information, which I have not seen, Democrats and Republicans have concluded that the FBI acted appropriately in countering a foreign intelligence operation inside the United States aimed at destabilizing our country.
And I'm saying I would like to know more, and you're attacking me for wanting to know more. Would you like to know, for example, who authorized this? On what legal basis did this take place? Are these interesting questions to you, or do you think it's unpatriotic to ask them? Because that's a suggestion.
No, I'd want to ask questions. I want to know why. I want to know why the FBI didn't uncover what the Trump campaign was doing in 2016, including the Trump Tower meeting, and blow the cover on that. So we would have known about that before the election. We should have known about that. And the FBI did not disclose what they knew about the Russians and the Trump campaign colluding. We should have been told, and that's just wrong. And the FBI director
I don't even understand what you're saying. I haven't understood a single exchange of this entire conversation. Okay. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Good luck with your Senate race. I hope voters can understand what you're saying, because I can't. Nice to see you. Andrew McCarthy is former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, and he joins us tonight. Andy, thanks a lot for coming on.
My pleasure.
The semantic smokescreen, tiresome, and I think it is a semantic smokescreen. If you disagree, please tell me. But the deeper question is, what was the legal basis for this? What was the authorization? You just heard Richard Painter suggest there was a FISA warrant for this. Is that true? Could it be true?
You're quite right, Tucker. It is a semantic difference. I mean, even Chairman Gowdy, who objected to the word spy, admits there was an informant, right? So on one side of this, we have people who are engaged in hyperbole. The other side, they're engaged in euphemism. But we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about a covert operative who was sent in to get information. You don't have to have a FISA surveillance warrant to use an informant. In fact, it's a pretty low standard. We know there was some FISA surveillance. There may have been more than we know about, but that began in October, and it went basically for most of the next year, well into the Trump campaign. They were using an informant or a spy, whatever you want to call it, at least one, at least beginning in July. And I think the issue here is why they were doing it, not what you call it. And the most objectionable thing I think I heard from your last guest is he kept saying the people who've looked at the classified information, in point of fact, they haven't seen the classified information. A big part of what this whole debate has been about has been the fact that they've been asking for months and months from the Justice Department and the FBI to see the classified information, and they've been stonewalled.
Yeah, I mean, that conversation honestly was demented. I'm still confused by it. But the core questions remain. And tell me if I got the timeline wrong. Apparently, the conversations between this informant and members of the Trump campaign began before the counterintelligence investigation into Trump campaign ties to Russia began. So on what basis was this authorized?
Well, the investigation is formally opened, we think, around July the 31st. Now, they are allowed to do preliminary steps before they open a full-throttle investigation, and presumably they used that authorization or that authority that they have to use informants. But, you know, we're speculating, and we shouldn't be speculating at this point. We should actually know the answers. We should be now, at this point, able to say exactly when this investigation opened, not on paper, but when it really opened, when they started to do stuff, when they started to monitor people. That's what we need to
just
know.
in one sentence, because we're out of time, but just fact check it for me. You'd need a pretty high bar to do this in administration to a rival campaign, right?
You sure should. You sure should.
Yeah, you sure should. That's my instinct. Andrew McCarthy, thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
Well, the creepy porn lawyer is at it again. This time he is attacking Rudy Giuliani for stating that there might be a difference between a porn star and a church choir director. That distinction is no longer allowed. Does Mark Stein still recognize it? Well, ask him next.
You can play too. We've always had women who worked on the streets. A lot of them have put their kids through college.
She is probably one of the most successful porn stars in recent history. A lot of people have just looked at her, honestly. And, you know, you can question her career choices, but I think she's made a successful career for herself.
She's a mother, and she's a woman with a voice, and she's going to use it.
These people are they're literally beyond parody. Author and columnist Mark Stein joins us. Mark, I should just say that I'm actually by temperament pretty non-judgmental. I'm not mad at Stormy Daniels or anything, but I can't help but notice, the impulse on the left is always to elevate and celebrate anything that is repulsive, degrading, bad for you, anything that is low and ugly, they deify. What is that about?
Yeah, I think there's an element of, I would say, I thought originally it was confusion, but I think it's actually intentional. Because on the one hand, you have Miss America saying we're not going to have a swimsuit round anymore because that's demeaning of women. So that you can't have a swimsuit round, but if you take off your swimsuit and you have sex with 37 different guys on screen in one motion picture, then people will hail you. I want to make sure I get the correct quote here, quote, one of the most successful porn stars ever. That's a really great thing to be. I mean, porn is rubbish. The plot's rubbish. The dialogue's rubbish. It's an art form.
Whoa. And look, in the interest of journalism, I'm sorry, before you go, we actually checked her oeuvre. Okay. Her films on IMDb, and here are some of them, and you may not be familiar because maybe you're not as cultured as some of us. Sex Bots, Program for Pleasure, right. Trailer Trash Nurses. I mean, these are the ones we can sort of read on TV. Yeah. I mean, are you speaking before you've really looked in to what she's done?
Well, actually, my Obamacare plan only covers me for trailer trash nurses. I went to the doctor the other day and I had to have the trailer trash nurse practitioner, so that didn't really work out for me. What was the other one? Sex Bots? Sex Bots program.
I'm too embarrassed.
Sex Bots program for pleasure. I think actually, I do believe that Robert Mueller has indicted 13 Russian sex bots program for pleasure as part of the Mueller probe. So I'd be interested to see whether they turn up in court. But look, it's
the probe indeed.
There is a confusion here, and I think it goes back to what you said in the introduction, that a lady in a swimsuit parading around as Miss New Hampshire or Miss
Bots, Program for Pleasure, right. Trailer Trash Nurses. I mean, these are the ones we can sort of read on TV. Yeah. I mean, are you speaking before you've really looked in to what she's done?
Well, actually, my Obamacare plan only covers me for trailer trash nurses. I went to the doctor the other day and I had to have the trailer trash nurse practitioner, so that didn't really work out for me. What was the other one? Sex Bots? Sex Bots program.
I'm too embarrassed.
Sex Bots program for pleasure. I think actually, I do believe that Robert Mueller has indicted 13 Russian sex bots program for pleasure as part of the Mueller probe. So I'd be interested to see whether they turn up in court. But look, it's
the probe indeed.
There is a confusion here, and I think it goes back to what you said in the introduction, that a lady in a swimsuit parading around as Miss New Hampshire or Miss Idaho, because that's a fairly harmless pleasure, we have to get rid of it. But on the other hand, if you have something that is utterly degrading and is actually, as I said, objectively worthless, it's an art form whose only value is what it stimulates in the viewer. It has no intrinsic value of itself. And suddenly that's something to celebrate. I heard, by the way, last night, I was just about to turn into bed, and I heard Shannon Bream, I nearly fell off my chair. Shannon said that down in New Zealand, the Queen had just given a damehood to a former prostitute, and I was so shocked I looked it up before I went to bed, and she'd been made a Dame Commander of Her Majesty's Most Excellent Order of New Zealand Order of Merit for services on to the rights of sex workers. So we are doing something here where we are taking the most low and degrading kind of work a woman can do and somehow pretending that it's empowering of women. And whether that's Stormy Daniels or this new dame down in New Zealand, that is not the case. It's an industry that exploits and degrades women. And in that sense, you should be able to say what Rudy said, because it's self-evident.
And you shouldn't be forced to lie. And that's what they want you to do. They want you to lie because it's a way of establishing dominance over you. I'm going to make you lie. And if you don't, I'll crush you. That's what they're really saying.
Right.
Mark Stein, very deep
Living
and smart,
the lie.
as always. Thank you. Living
Thanks
the lie.
a lot, Tucker.
Amen. See ya. Penn Station's bathrooms are, those of us who've been there can tell you, a sign of America's physical decline and decrepitude. But Amtrak says and reassures us they have them all cleaned up now. Well, we sent a reporter to find out if that's true, and we'll show you the results next.
Well, that's obviously not what it's built for.
Yep, no chance of getting an arm or leg under that thing.
Amtrak was eager to tell us how they've evolved, how Penn Station is becoming more of a destination transit hub and less of a third world slump.
We don't want people to necessarily feel that way or have that opinion. We want to invoke a great experience, that you're not only coming from the train, but you're getting off the train as well, that the journey doesn't end just off the train.
Exit the fancy new restrooms, and it's the same old intimidating Penn Station of yesteryear. Exit on 7th Avenue with people still on the floor. Exit on 8th Avenue.
That's obviously not what it's built for.
Yep, no chance of getting an arm or leg under that thing. Amtrak was eager to tell us how they've evolved, how Penn Station is becoming more of a destination transit hub and less of a third world slump.
We don't want people to necessarily feel that way or have that opinion. We want to invoke a great experience, that you're not only coming from the train, but you're getting off the train as well, that the journey doesn't end just off the train.
Exit the fancy new restrooms, and it's the same old intimidating Penn Station of yesteryear. Exit on 7th Avenue, and you're greeted with people sleeping on the floor. Exit on 8th Avenue, same deal. And there's this, opposite Madison Square Garden, dozens of homeless people camping out for the night, others seemingly up to no good at all. Not everyone dislikes